Armenian General Benevolent Union in Europe, and we are very pleased to organize this event in partnership with the Honorary Consulate of Armenia in Luxembourg.
I'm starting now.
This presentation is an opportunity to share with you some of the compelling and surprising stories told in the book Armenia, Mon Amour, and hear from some of its contributors who will be presented to you shortly, and who I would like to personally thank for taking part of this initiative. It is always a pleasure for us Armenians to see how Armenia, which is so dear, also holds a special place in the heart of many non-Armenians. In a period of time when Armenians felt rather forgotten by the international community during the recent war in Artsakh, this expression of interest, love, and support is particularly appreciated. Thank you again to you, Frank, Bernard, and Svante, and to all the Europeans who contributed to this book. I have the pleasure to leave the floor now to Tatev to continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Gortzounian, for taking part in our webinar. And good evening, everyone. It's just unfortunate to say that two of our speakers are having technical problems with joining, but we will wait for them to connect. And I welcome you all the panelists and the attendees and the ones who follow this webinar live on social media. Webinar about the book Armenia, Mon Amour by Svante Lundgren and Serafim Sepala, an anthology written by 10 non-Armenians who share common love and their personal experiences of Armenia. I'm very delighted to mention that our webinar and the book itself has become, if I may say so, a pan-European event because it's supported by Benelux Armenian communities, AGBU Europe, the Armenian Embassy to the Netherlands and to Luxembourg, the Honorary Consulate of Armenia in Luxembourg, and the biggest Belgian expat community, internations, and so on. So I think it's welcome, Mr. Ambassador. So we are waiting for Frank Engel to join us. And I think it's high time to introduce our panelists. And I would, of course, like to begin with Svante Lundgren, the co-editor of Armenia, Mon Amour, professor at Lund University in Sweden, professionalized in history of religions and religious behavioral science. Mr. Ambassador Tigran Balayan, the ambassador of Armenia to the Netherlands and to Luxembourg, who was very instrumental in promoting the book. Bernard Coulie, professor of philology and Oriental history at Catholique University of Louvain, the only European who took ancient Armenian Grapar seriously. And I was honored to be present at an event when Mr. Coulie received a Medal of Appreciation by the Armenian community of Belgium a year ago, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, Frank Engel, formerly a member of the European Parliament, presently my husband, for the ones who don't know, and party president in Luxembourg, who was the Honorary Consul of Armenia in Luxembourg for 15 years, who received Mkhitar Gosh Medal from the Armenian government and Medal of Gratitude from Artsakhi government. So I welcome you all. And before we proceed, I would like to tell to our attendees that they can send their questions to Q&A section because the last 20-30 minutes of our webinar will be dedicated to your question, to the questions of attendees, to the speakers. And before that, I would just like to inform the speakers that we will start one by one, having 5 to 7 minutes of speaking time. And I will, of course, start with Mr. Lundgren as the co-editor of the book, Armenian Mon Amour, by asking how you come up with the idea of the book and what was the reasoning behind gathering 10 Europeans deeply interested in my ancient nation, its history and culture. Please, Mr. Lundgren.
Thank you, Tatev, for your introduction and for also being crucial in getting this webinar to get together tonight. Yes, this is the book. I will show it to those who haven't seen it yet. And it was really my initiative. I know Serafim Seppälä from some years back. It was in fact our common interest in Armenia that brought us together. I translated one of his books on Armenia some years ago from Finnish to Swedish. And then we met, and he said to me that we should do something together again, a common project, but this time in English, and why not an anthology? And I said, yes, but didn't think very much about it then. But sometime later, I came up with the idea that why don't ask people like us, people who are non-Armenians, but for one or another reason have come to develop an interest in Armenia and even a love for Armenia. Why don't invite people like that to tell about their story, about their Armenian journey? That is, how come that these people have transformed from being normal people to being these kind of Armenia nerds like we are. And so we started to invite people, and in the end we were able to get a good crowd together, so that we would have loved to have some more, but in the end we have 10 contributors. Interestingly enough, from 10 different European countries, which I like very much. So this is really a pan-European project and book. And of course, the question we ask is how come that a normal European has developed this passion even for Armenia? And then you might, because I know the book because I edited it, so you might ask then, okay, what is the answer? How do people go through this development? Well, in the book you will find 10 different answers, because everybody has his or her own journey. And in the end, it's very difficult to say exactly what it is that attracts so much in Armenia. And I will read 2 sentences from the book. And this is from Serafim Seppälä's contributions. He writes, to put it short, for unknown reasons, there are souls who immediately feel at home when entering Armenia. For some further unknown reasons, I am one of those who have this strange affinity. So it's not easy to say what it is. It's different for different persons. And I also, in one way, I see that it's quite coincidental. And let me take one example. And this is from the contribution by Kate Royster, who is a writer from Denmark. She was visiting Syria on a tourist trip there. And when coming to Aleppo, she was reading a Danish tourist guide. And there it said, the Danish aid worker Karen Jeppe is buried at the Armenian cemetery in Aleppo. At this time, Kate had never heard about Karen Jeppe, and she was so confused. Who is this Danish aid worker? And how come she is buried at the Armenian cemetery in Aleppo? So when she came back to Denmark, she started to read everything she found about Karen Jeppe, and eventually she wrote a book about Karen Jeppe. And that was the start on her Armenian journey. And had it not been for that trip to Syria, had it not been for the fact that she read that particular guidebook, nothing of that would have happened. But now it happened, and she became one of those who are so much in love with Armenia. By the way, it's an interesting detail that also my own Armenian journey started with a visit to Syria, but I'm not going to tell that story now. You can read it in the book. But anyway, I now, because I meet almost in real life some of the contributors to the book, I want to thank them for joining this project so that we could get the book together. And I also want to thank the publisher, Ninve Press, for publishing the book and for giving it such a nice layout. And I think I have used my 5-7 minutes by that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lundgren. And I would like to mention that the book has echoed also in Armenia by the biggest, actually, media sources, Armen Press, MediaMax, and CivilNet, if I'm not mistaken. And I would like to ask Mr. Ambassador as our second speaker. During our high-level meetings in Luxembourg, you offered the book as a present to politicians, and not only, and that's what I called actually being instrumental in promotion of the book. And here comes my question about your viewpoint about the book as an Armenian, which the book came out during these difficult times for Armenia. So please, Mr. Ambassador.
Yeah, thank you, Tatev, and thanks to publishers, to the inspirers, and to the implementators of this great idea. And let me start with the following. If you Google our book, Armenia, you will find maybe hundreds or thousands of titles published in all the corners of the world. But this publication, for me personally, it's both unique and symbolic. First of all, it's unique because it is inspired and written by true friends of Armenia who do care about the challenges that my nation faces. And it is symbolic as it was published in the most dramatic and tragic days in Armenia's newest history. But it explores the beauty of the country and the mentality of the nation, viewed from outside. Two of the authors, Bernard Coulie and Frank Engel, are the friends of long date, and it makes my attachment to the book very personal. And last but not least, in this series, in this series of my personal attachment, I would say, it has particular significance as it is published by a Dutch publishing house, where in the Netherlands, where I have the honor and privilege to represent my country as an ambassador. The personal stories of the authors are their journeys into different angles of Armenian identity, history, culture, and Armenians as people. It is a indeed very good visit card for Armenian realities for foreigners. I had a chance to, as Tatev mentioned, I had a chance to present it to a number of intellectuals, officials, even members of royal families. And I will conclude by mentioning that when I presented this book to one of the outgoing Dutch MPs, he later gave it as a present to his successor in the Dutch parliament as a dossier on Armenia, as an Armenian file, with an advice to read it in order to get acquainted with Armenia, its history and realities. That fact speaks for itself. I mean, you have made a complete overview of Armenia. If you want a manual for foreigners on Armenia, and my wholeheartedly gratitude to you and for the idea and for the courage to implement that. Thank you very much. We have lost Tatev, yeah, I see.
I'm afraid so.
Yes, it seems like our moderator has some technical problems. So if I step in, after being an editor, I might also be able to be a moderator, at least for the time being. So let me give the word next to Professor Bernard Coulie. And I don't know what Tatev had thought of asking you, but maybe you can speak just like from your heart without any particular question.
Okay, thank you. So first, thank you very much, Svante, for having offered me the opportunity to join that initiative and to be part of the book. So I'm very honored to have been called to that, and thank you also, Tigran, for your kind words. It's a pleasure to see you again after so many years that we haven't seen each other. Okay. So my story is, well, it is peculiar and not peculiar. I'm not the only one in the book who started with some kind of a scholarly interest with Armenia. There are other authors in the book who were studying Armenian history, and then eventually traveled to the country, and and then felt attracted by the country and loved Armenia, and especially the Armenian people. But in my case, the peculiar aspect is that it took me quite a long time before I was able to know that Armenia was still existing. Although I was studying Armenian studies for some years. So I was a student at the university in ancient languages, in classical languages, in classical literatures and cultures, basically Greek and Latin. And then I moved to some Eastern languages like ancient Armenian, ancient Georgian, Sanskrit. But of course, when you study Greek and Latin, you know that nobody is speaking Latin anymore, and nobody is speaking ancient Greek anymore. So you know that you are dealing with ancient languages. I don't like to call them dead languages, so let's call them ancient languages, languages of times gone. And this is the way I entered Armenian studies. So I started by studying the Graba, so the ancient Armenian language, the grammar, the literature, and then the history around it, the creation of the alphabet by Mashtots, okay, and all that stuff, without knowing that there were still Armenians on the surface of the earth. I didn't know that, because as I try to explain in my paper, that was almost 40 years ago. And 40 years ago, the world was divided between East and West, the Western world and let's say the USSR, and Armenia was part of the USSR. And that was a totally unknown world for a young Belgian teenager. We had no contact whatsoever with members of the Armenian community in Belgium. So I'm not Armenian, and I knew no Armenians at all in Belgium. So I studied ancient Armenian like I was studying Greek and Latin, just in order to be able to read the cultural and the literary productions of an ancient culture. And it took me some time to have opportunities to meet first with Armenians in Belgium, members of the Armenian community in Belgium. And that was the first, not a shock, but let's say a surprise. So I was discovering that there were still people, there were Armenians speaking Armenian, modern language, of course, to the Grabar. And then I had opportunities to attend scholarly conferences around the world, and also in Armenia. So I started to travel in Armenia just to attend conferences, to deliver papers in these conferences. And then, okay, I discovered that Armenia was still alive. And that was an absolute, an incredible experience in a way, because what I thought was totally an element of the past, having totally disappeared, was still alive today. Of course, in a modern modern way, in new structures, a new state. But the first times I went to Armenia, it was not an independent state yet. It was still in the Soviet period. So, and that increased my interest for Armenian studies. So I became even more interested in Armenian studies when I realized that it was not only related to the past and to ancient languages, ancient history, and ancient people, but that these people are still there, and especially because in Armenian culture, still today, that idea of a continuity between past and present, that idea that the Armenians of today and Armenia of today continue. They are not the inheritors or the survivors, they are continuing an uninterrupted story of the Armenian people. And therefore I became even more interested in my studies. But of course, then I slowly moved to different topics. So I start also studying genocide, so the whole of the Armenian history, the geopolitical situation of Armenia today. And I try to share that with as many people as I can, because of course I'm still professor at the university. I'm teaching ancient Armenian, so I'm myself professor of Graba, so the ancient Armenian language, in a program of ancient languages. But for more than 10 years now, I am organizing trips and guiding trips. So I'm a guide actually in Armenia. So I try to bring people from Belgium to Armenia to have the country, the culture, the history, and the people better known in Belgium. And for me, this is totally part of my job as a scholar. So I am a scholar, a university professor, but I could not envision my task as a scholar without being myself personally involved in contributing to that sense of continuity that is so typical of Armenian mentality and of the Armenian culture. This is it. Now that Tatev is back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coulie, and I'm sorry we had just a small technical issue. We were out for a couple of minutes, but I realized Mr. Lundgren took it over, and I had a question to Mr. Coulie, and I don't know if that was the question that was asked about Mashtots, Koryon, and Yeznik. We discussed last time we met Mr. Lundgren. Or I go on with my question to Mr. Coulie.
As you know, Svante asked me how I get interested in Armenian, actually.
Then for sure, I need to ask my question. It's about your academic involvement in Armenian literature and history. And as you wrote in the book, the first Armenians you met were called Mashtots, Koryon, Yeznik, in the context of literature and history. So being so much academically involved, when was the point of time when actually books met reality? And what was the difference between meeting living Armenians and the past way Armenians or dead Armenians, if I may ask so?
Okay, so as I said, I think I answered more or less the question, but as I said, the moment was when I started meeting Armenians, so Armenians alive in Belgium first, and then also in Armenia, because I started to travel to Armenia to attend academic conferences. And then I realized that what I was studying in the past had a continuity in the present. And that idea of continuity was increasing my interest for Armenian studies. So there are two turning points, two turning moments. When I met Armenians in Belgium, because before that I didn't know that there were Armenians in Belgium. And then when I started to travel to Armenia in the late 80s, early 90s of the 20th century, so quite a time ago, so before independence, actually.
Thank you very much. And I will give the floor to last speaker, my husband, Frank Engel, who sits next to me, and I would like to ask him actually the same question, being involved politically for so many years. When was the point of time when it became more of a personal involvement rather than a political, or altogether, I suppose?
I'll take the technological elements a little over to my side, if you'll allow me. She's still sitting next to me, thanks for the invitation to this, and Svante, thanks. This is the first time that we're meeting almost live for the excellent initiative of this book. I liked it very much when I saw what it had become. But in my case, contrary to Bernard, I've met only real Armenians. I mean, living ones. And by the time this all started, I did not of course have his academic and profound knowledge about what this ancient nation had been before I could come across its modern day representatives. But one of the fascinating things about Armenia is, of course, that it's one of the few remaining old nations that are still, in a way, what they've been thousands of years ago. In this part of the world, you wouldn't really come across anything like that. You'd have to go to Iran or to China or to such places in order to find something similar. That's also one of the elements that fascinated me. But I have to confess that at the very beginning, it was more or less a chance encounter. When the then ambassador Tigran, who used to be Tigran's boss at the time, was almost the last century. We don't need to remember it live, really. Contacted the parliamentary group of my party, of which I was then Secretary General, just in order to establish contact. I received him out of interest. I had no very particular attachment to Armenia then. And after the conversation with him, it took me something like 3 weeks in order to board a plane and fly to Armenia for the first time. So either he had been very persuasive, which he was completely capable of being, or I had just discovered that there was something that I needed to find out on my own. And the personal involvement was as good as immediate. I tell this story in my contribution to the book as well. When we were leaving Armenia, when we were supposed to leave Armenia, there was a little issue with gathering the money to pay the hotel, because credit card payments had been down again. I mean, this was what, 2001, 2002. Wasn't easy at the time. And I wasn't used to traveling with loads of cash on oneself. It was a little bit of a problem to gather all this, but eventually we managed. And the last interlocutor that we were supposed to talk to, an Armenian academic, who I'd met once in my life before, saw the trouble that we had and asked me if he could help because he had $100 of cash in his wallet. Now, $100 in those days in Armenia was probably what the man earned in a month. I've met no one, nowhere on earth, ever since or before, and probably never will again, who will say to a stranger, "You need my last month's income, here it is, if that helps you." And those are elements that beyond any abstract notions of historical relevance, tragic suffering of the people, and so on, immediately bind you to a people emotionally, and that has never left me ever since. That's also why I believe that it was so, certainly not intended, but so fitting at the end of the day that this book came out at precisely this historic juncture of the Republic of Armenia, after what the nation witnessed again in last autumn. Because at the end of the day, the story of Armenia is a story of suffering all the time. It's a story of deprivation. It's a story of being driven away. It's a story of territories being usurped and of essentially being told that you have no business being here. We were there first, or it's us who belong here. And the Armenians never gave up. And this never giving up is something which also for a politician, no matter where they're active, is a conviction and an attitude from which I draw much inspiration.
Thank you very much. And I would like to start the Q&A section for already, and I will start with my first question from an outstanding Spanish lady, Angela Garcia Lopez, who mastered Armenian language like no other, and she is the wife of world-renowned violin player Sergei Khachatyan. So she writes, and the question is to all the speakers. She writes, it conveys a deep sense of hope to witness the recognition, appreciation, and love that the Armenian people receive from outside Armenia. What steps do you believe need to be taken politically, economically, and culturally inside Armenia by its citizens and outside Armenia by diaspora to amplify lasting and potential change? Should we start with you, Mr. Lundgren?
We can start here, but I don't really know how to answer this question because it's a huge question and it's not for me to decide what the Armenians should do politically, for example. But let me say like this, I mean, for me, I think the most important thing for Armenians and for friends of Armenia right now is to support the country so that it will become prosperous, democratic, and stable. And as we all know, right now the situation is very shaky in Armenia, both politically and economically and so on. And I cannot say what will happen. If somebody would ask that, what do you think will happen in 3 months' time or in 6 months' time in Armenia? I don't know. But let me say that in the long run, I remain very optimistic because I see so much potential in the country and in the people. So in the long run, I definitely think that Armenia will become more prosperous, more democratic, more stable. And right now it's the task of all Armenians and all friends of Armenia worldwide to support that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. What would your response be?
I think I'm the primary person to answer that question, of course.
As a citizen of Armenia.
As a citizen of Armenia and as someone who has the privilege to represent Armenia abroad officially, and as you do, by the way, Tatev, and as a direct stakeholder of all those developments. Yeah. First of all, I would like to note that yes, we have an obligation and a pledge to do so, and the way we are doing it is the right way. Elections. Yeah, new elections will be held in early summer. And I'm pretty much sure it will be as transparent, as fair, as just as we had in 2018. But again, I would like to express a general feeling, which is not common maybe for an ambassador to do so, but I'm representing Armenia in the Netherlands, and the Dutch are known for their directness and bluntness in some way. You know, feeling in the Armenian society, and not only in Armenia, being abandoned by Europe, by democratic countries, so on, it could be applicable here as well. If you see, we have in Georgia, okay, the political crisis at a minor scale will be in Georgia, but then EU jumped in, appointed a moderator, someone who is mediating between the political parties, etc. But Armenian democracy survived because of maturity of our own political system, without any foreign interference. And that I call the maturity of civil society, or civilian structures and democratic structures. So this should be recognized and rewarded by those who are promoting democratic values, democracy, human rights, and market economy or so. Maybe we have to wait a little bit for more concrete actions, politically, economically, but anyway, I'm optimistic, and that's part of my job to bring this message into the countries, to the authorities of the countries, to the public of the countries which I have the honor to represent Armenia. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Frank, would you like to jump in?
Well, I can. I'm going to say plenty of things that the ambassador shouldn't hear, but then again, we discuss these matters regularly enough for him to know them all already. I think the most important thing for the Armenians to do right now is to stay, because so many do not want to. And in the last 20 or 30 years, it's not as if there had been a dramatic demographic increase in Armenia. On the contrary, and even if some have repatriated themselves, a lot have also left. And I'm afraid that if now the logic were that leaving is the best solution, because internally no solution is going to be found anytime soon, that might very well sound the death knell of the Republic of Armenia as we know it. I know the creativity of Armenians everywhere, but especially inside the country. I know how these people have been able to live and survive and to thrive and to invent and to create and to put themselves on the map in areas that have nothing to do with ancient nations. I mean, artificial intelligence, for instance, is not something that you would typically associate with 3,000-year-old people, but they do it. A lot of other things in information technology as well. So all of that is there, but it needs to stay there. And politics would, of course, be called upon under normal circumstances to provide the conditions for them to stay. And that would mean that they would be able to engage in a civilized dialogue even now. But if you have one half of the political spectrum that is accusing the other half of the political spectrum to have betrayed and sold out the country, then that is, of course, a way in which it's relatively difficult to maintain that sort of serenity that would compel people to stay, go and vote, and then move ahead after what's it going to be, the 20th of June, I believe, for the upcoming elections. But I would really wish that Armenians in the country stayed, because it is their country. They only have one. And I also believe that for too long, too much of the attention of the nation has been focused exclusively on two things: genocide recognition and Artsakh. Now, I've been one of the architects of genocide recognition by my own country, so I'm fully on board with the idea of having it recognized, but this must not monopolize the political outlook of an institutional system and of the whole nation. And Artsakh, well, we see how it is going now. It was my private conviction that this moment was going to come anyway, and for a long time. A little readiness to discuss the final settlement, which has not been there for such a long time, would maybe not have prevented the invasion. I'm under no illusion there, but might possibly have also left to a different sort of outcome. So the one thing is long in the past. The other thing is 3/4 gone. What is left is the Republic of Armenia. And what is left is the continuation of the historic endeavor and trajectory of this unique nation. And I would really wish Armenians around the globe, but above all those who've chosen to live in Armenia, whether they've always done it or whether they've come there, to stay and finish the job. Finishing the job means making Armenia fly high again.
Thank you. And Mr. Coulie, would you like to comment on the question, please?
Well, okay, it's not up to non-Armenians to tell to the Armenians what they should do, what they ought to do. But I'm very much in line with Tigran's and Frank's words, actually. Of course, investing in the new generations and creating opportunities for these young people. This is what matters the most now. And besides that, being united. Armenians need to be united today. Okay, but of course there are divisions in the society, there are political parties. I am myself a Belgian, and I know what the division of a country means. There are political parties with diverging visions of the society, but this is not at all what political parties are in Armenia. They are divided, but they are not divided according to political lines. This is something totally different, but we will not enter that topic here. So being united, but the problem is that if all Armenians were united in Armenia and between the diaspora and Armenia, there would not be Armenians anymore. Because being divided is really in the heart of the Armenian mentality, of the Armenian soul. As Frank says, Armenians never give up. They never give up being Armenians. This is true. But each Armenian never gives up his own opinions, his own ideas. And this is why it's extremely difficult to have these people, these guys united. If you look at the thing in an historical way, I'm sorry, but okay, this is my job. So I always try to look on the long term and in an historical way. Of course, Armenians, they've been suffering all the time. Frank was just telling that again. But these problems, the difficulties in Armenian history are pretty much the result of the divisions between Armenians since the very beginning of Armenian history. They've never been united, actually. But this is the origin of their problems. But this is also what kept them alive. If they've been able to survive through all these difficulties, it is precisely because they were divided, because there has always been a group of Armenians able to make an agreement, to negotiate an agreement with the neighbor countries. And this is what allowed the Armenians to be still here, to be still there today. So the dialectics between union and division is really central to the Armenian history. So they need to be united, but not too much though, because if they are all united, they will not survive anyway. So this is extremely difficult. But if I look at Armenia today, they are too much divided on secondary issues. If you look at on how to manage the consequences of the war now, okay, I'm following what's going on in Armenia. They are divided on secondary issues. So this is the problem. But I am optimistic, but anyway.
Thank you very much. Very interesting topic to give a deep thought. Dear Nadia, would you like to comment on something or just to jump in the discussion?
I'm eager to jump in the discussion. Just one comment as
please.
For Bernard Coulie. It's funny, I'm always struggling whether Armenians are different from the others or not. I'm not personally totally convinced, but it's really interesting to see your point, because you just mentioned that we were special. I don't know, and I don't know whether there is a strength or a weakness. But again, I would just join also Frank saying that we're optimistic. We have no other choice. And yes, we are very determined to survive. So that would be my comment for now.
Thank you very much. And I will get back to the questions of the attendees. One of our attendees is asking, dealing with Armenian nation, history and country, what surprised you the most? It's a general question, and should we start with you, Mr. Lundgren?
Well, that is a very good question. What surprised me the most? Okay, I spontaneously now. You see, as I say in my book, unfortunately I'm a very late starter. I was like, almost 50 years when I first visited Armenia, and I have some regrets. I should have gone there long before. But when I came to Armenia, I'm also like Bernard. I'm a scholar, but not in ancient languages. But I'm a genocide scholar, so I went there because of that, and what I expected to find was really. I mean, I had read a lot about our modern, not about Mesrop Mashtots and the old Armenians, but I have read about modern history, about the genocide and modern Armenia. So things were pretty much as I expected them to be. Armenia is a very mountainous country, and with this long history and old culture and so on. What maybe surprised me the most was how modern and really alive Yerevan as a city was. I mean, really walking there along the Northern Avenue and seeing all these Gucci's and other fashion shops and trendy cafes and things like that. I know that there are parts of Yerevan who are very like Soviet style, but the central Yerevan is like a bustling modern European country, and that was a very nice surprise for me. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mr. Coulie, would you share with us about the surprises you had in Armenia or with Armenians?
That's a difficult question. Okay, the first time I went there, it was in the early 90s, so during the war in Karabakh. So of course the situation was hectic. And of course that was surprising because I was coming from Belgium, Western Europe, a comfort zone without any serious problems. And then I was landing there in the middle of a war, not in Yerevan, but they were cutting the trees in the streets. Okay, that was an incredible situation. So it was surprising for me. That was an unknown situation for me, but quite an experience, by the way. So certainly that, but this is circumstantial, of course. Also, certainly, that topic of memory, a topic that I tackled a little bit in my paper, I tried to tackle in my paper, that topic of memory. So the fact that Armenians, they have a very deep feeling of belonging to a tradition, to an history. Of course, they are with a tendency to have a negative view of history, always focusing on the problems, the sufferings, the genocide. As Frank said, it's high time to not to forget that, of course, it's not the question, but to try to move to something different and to build a future and not only to try to reconcile with the past. So, but that topic of memory, I'm very much impressed by that, because in our modern lay societies in Western Europe, memory is totally gone. Memory is a cultural luxury. It's not living. In Armenia, memory, or with the Armenians, memory is living. This is not something we keep alive here in Western Europe. So, and as an historian, of course, I'm very sensitive to that, living memories.
Thank you very much. And now I'm very cautious to ask Frank about surprises because he lives with an Armenian. So, but I'll still go for it and ask about the surprises he had or has with the Armenian.
I will spare you the surprises that I've been through in my marital life, but everyone who's ever been married to an Armenian, and there is one or the other around here, knows what that can be like. I was sort of surprised when a couple of years ago I discovered that there is still a place where you can, as good as physically worship a white Lada Niva and proudly drive it across your country, which is something, of course, that I then promptly did as well, and which was a delight. On the less funny side, no, it's I would probably join Bernard in his developments of the meaning of memory, because whether you have been to Tigran on the 24th of April or not, but especially if you have done that, you realize that the whole country is breathing its past. And I sometimes have the impression that it is also at the same time choking on its past, and thus not really able to the full extent of what could be, to embrace what is about to come. I mean, if we move just across the northern border, we're in Georgia. The Georgians have a history which is, I would dare to say, as good as old as that of the Armenians. I don't want to get into a quarrel of historians here, but Bernard will probably agree to my approximate formulation. And the Georgians have their own struggles. They've always had them with the Russians. They have two territories which they claim are theirs, and which those that inhabit them claim are not theirs, and all of that has not made the Georgians look to the past or look to the left or to the right. The Georgians keep looking ahead, in a way. They have aims and they have goals, and if they go through wars, they pursue them. And this is something which sort of makes me sad every now and then, knowing that there was a time when Tbilisi was very much an Armenian city, cultural capital of the Caucasus, and that was an Armenian city, even though nominally on Sakartvelo territory. But the ones managed to distract themselves sort of from their plights. The others are at risk of drowning in them, and that is something, of course, not necessarily surprising, but remarkable to look at, and which also tells me that it will be important to move out. And look, I come from a very small country. It's even smaller than Belgium, and Belgium is as big as Armenia, so I know what being small means. And we Luxembourgers have this tendency of always looking at us having been oppressed throughout history and being deprived of chances and things and stuff. But at some point, we've also just decided to seize opportunities, and that has led to some considerable success that the nation has had. Of course, in the comfort of successful European integration and of peace and of co-development across the whole first Western and then total part of this continent. But still, and this is something that I believe every nation needs to determine for itself. Mine is very young. We might have a castle bearing our name 1,000 years ago, but the nation as such is 150 years old or so, if it has those. But we've managed to find out what we want to be for the time to come, not for the time that's gone by. Mm-hmm. And I believe that is an important thing for everyone to contemplate right now, because the challenges of the future are going to be, I'm afraid, for all of us, worse than those of the past.
Absolutely.
And I have a question to our ambassador, as Mr. Balayan, you know these two of the panelists very well and for a long time, and you know their long years of commitment to Armenia. How did it feel to read about their personal stories in the book, coming back to the book? And how did it feel to be a part of one of the chapters? So please.
No, it's a pleasure, of course, to read about yourself in a book, in such a lovely book that describes your country. You know, Mr. Coulie was known in Belgium, I mean, in Belgian Armenian diaspora, so to say, because he named his sons with Armenian names. So that was the something that was about Mr. Coulie. And I mean, Frank was the or is the first Luxembourgish person I met in Luxembourg when I traveled from Belgium to Luxembourg when I was responsible for relations between Armenia and Luxembourg, covering it from Belgium, and their personal stories. I mean, as Frank told, you symbolize his personal story with Armenia, and that's a strong side, yeah. And with Mr. Coulie, with his dedication to Armenia, to Armenia's history, culture, Grapar, etc. I mean, we don't have many academicians in Europe or worldwide who went so deep into Armenia's identity. That is why, I mean, those two personalities, those two individuals, one from politics, the other from academia, are an asset of presenting Armenia, Armenian cause, Armenia's cause in Europe, in the world. And I feel that actually, I feel that when each office I'm entering in Luxembourg and I'm starting to talk about Armenia, they reciprocate me. I know that our honorary consul in Luxembourg, ex-honorary consul in Luxembourg, Mr. Engel, did a great job there in presenting Armenia and talking constantly about Armenia. And I remember his article in The Word, right aftermath of this aggression, or the stopping of aggression, and the title was reading Pourquoi Karabakh.
Indeed, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. And here comes a question from one of our attendees, Bruno Schiers, which I will start with my husband. It's about Armenian language, he's interested. How did you learn Armenian? If so, and he is interested, how should he get himself into learning the language?
Well, the truth of the matter is that I have tried. I should probably keep trying because my success so far has been limited to a number of essentials. I am now able to read a menu in Armenian, and I am also able to order something, and I'm able to ask directions, but then I don't understand the answer. And that's a stage that everyone goes through in the language learning process. So, well, Armenian is not your easiest language to learn. Huh? No connection to anything that otherwise you know, and an alphabet of its own. It's a world of its own. It's a linguistic world of its own, and I have the impression it requires a lot of dedication. But I suppose that Bernard would be able to share with us some more relevant developments on this, because he certainly knows it better than I do.
Well, there are connections with other language because Armenian belongs to a linguistic family, but okay. But it's a difficult language. That this is true. Yes.
I think you can give the most insights about it, Mr. Coulie. So please, would you give some tips about learning Armenian language?
Well, of course, I took some lessons here in Belgium with a lady who was responsible of the educational center of the Armenian community, Asmi Kuyumjan. And then, that was many years ago, then I forgot almost everything. And then in the last year, because I was, in fact, before the pandemics, I was traveling quite often to Armenia several times a year. I decided to take it again seriously by just reading books. I am a bookman, so I'm a man of text and books. So I did not grasp any lessons. I just read books and tried and started to learn to speak modern Armenian. But I'm not as fluent as I wish. So there's still much progress to be done. But I can, like Frank, I can ask my way, and usually I don't get lost anymore.
Thank you very much. And here I wouldn't miss my chance to ask you about your relationship with Nadaran, with Mesrop Mashtal's Institute of Ancient Manuscripts, because I know you have a special relationship and you are one of those very few who is permitted to use a lot of materials in Nadaran for academic reasons. So would you tell us a bit more about it?
I'm not the only one to be allowed to, but the fact is that there are very few people able to go to work there on the manuscript. But of course, so my material, this is the manuscript. So I'm working on manuscripts written in ancient Armenian in the Middle Age, in the monasteries that tourists go and visit. But when tourists go and visit the ruins, the stones, I see what was happening there during the Middle Age. I still see the monks copying manuscripts inside these walls. So I go to the Nadaran quite often to work in the library, to read manuscripts, to copy text, because my scholarly work is to edit, so to publish, to publish texts written in ancient Armenian, to translate them and to comment them. So to make these texts available to the scholarly audience. It's not, these are not bestsellers, of course, it's not just scholarly publication. So this is my, okay, for me, that's the place to be in Nadaran, of course, because my material is there. Okay.
Of course, and that was a question I wanted to ask for a long time. And I would like to thank you all the speakers, for your very interesting insights. And before rounding off our webinar, I would like to thank Mr. Lundgren and you all, of course, for contributing to the book, to this incredible and remarkable anthology. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Lundgren for a final word, or for a last word. Please, Mr. Lundgren.
Okay, thank you, Tatev, for moderating our session, and thanks to all of those who in the panel and for all those of you who followed this. It's been a privilege to work with this anthology and to see how many that really many people. I mean, we wrote the book especially for non-Armenians, to encourage them to get interested in and visiting Armenia. But of course, many Armenians have also read the book, because they are, of course, curious about what do the non-Armenians think about us. So I really hope, if you haven't read the book already, please do it. I think it's worth the time it takes. And if you wonder how to order a copy, I have posted in the chat the link for that. Go to the homepage of the publisher Ninve Press, and there you can buy your copy or your copies. Thank you so much for tonight. Shnor HaKalojun.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.